I wasn't invited to my own father's retirement celebration. The text from my brother Marcus cut like a blade. Dad says don't come. He wants dignity, not reminders of failure. Failure. That's what they called my Pentagon career. But I didn't come to celebrate the man who disowned me. I came to see if my mother still remembered the daughter who promised to make her proud. So I showed up anyway, until Marcus's Air Force colonel looked me in the eye and said the words that would destroy my family's world. I hadn't spoken to my father in 8 years. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Not since the night he threw my military academy acceptance letter in the trash and told me I was too weak, too stupid, and too worthless to wear any uniform that mattered. Real soldiers don't come from failures like you, Diana, he'd said, his voice dripping with the same contempt he'd shown me since childhood. You'll embarrass yourself and disgrace our name. Our name. The Harrison family name meant everything to him. My father, Colonel Thomas Harrison, had built his identity around 3 decades of Air Force service, rising through the ranks on sheer determination and old-school military pride. My brother Marcus followed perfectly in his footsteps. Sharp, disciplined, everything a military son should be. Then there was me, the daughter who struggled in school, who was too quiet, too sensitive, who couldn't even make the high school basketball team. But Marcus's text wasn't just about Dad's retirement party. It was about maintaining the family image he'd spent years carefully crafting. After I'd enlisted against his wishes, after I'd proven him wrong by not just surviving but excelling, he'd simply erased me. No congratulations when I made sergeant. No acknowledgement when I earned my commission. No response when I sent photos from my deployment ceremonies. I became a ghost in my own family. The retirement celebration was being held at the Riverside Country Club, the same place where Dad had celebrated every major milestone. His promotion to colonel, Marcus's graduation from the Air Force Academy, even my brother's wedding 2 years ago, an event I learned about through Facebook. 300 guests would be there tonight. Military brass, local politicians, family friends who'd watched me grow up. Everyone except the daughter, who'd somehow climbed from enlisted ranks to places Dad couldn't even imagine. Mom had tried to bridge the gap over the years. Secret phone calls when Dad wasn't home, birthday cards sent to my base addresses. Always signed, Love Mom, with no mention of the rest of the family. But she was trapped between loyalty to her husband and love for her daughter. Each conversation ended the same way. He just needs time, Diana. He'll come around. 8 years was apparently not enough time. Nussbaum. I stared at Marcus's message for the 3rd time, feeling that familiar hollow ache in my chest. The same feeling I'd carried through basic training, through officer candidate school, through every promotion ceremony where I'd scan the crowd hoping to see familiar faces that never appeared. They'd called me worthless, but I'd spent every day since proving them wrong. Not for them, for me. For the scared 18-year-old girl who'd believed she'd never amount to anything. But tonight wasn't about proving anything. Tonight was about saying goodbye. Not to Dad. I'd grieved that relationship years ago. But to Mom. To the woman who'd packed my bags for basic training while tears streamed down her face, who'd whispered, "Make us proud," even as her husband called me a disappointment. She deserved to see who I'd become, even if she could never say it out loud. I deleted Marcus's message without responding. Let them have their perfect family celebration. I'd learned long ago that the family you choose matters more than the one you're born into. My real family wore uniforms, had my back in firefights, and understood that honor wasn't about bloodlines. It was about service. But I was going anyway, not as the worthless daughter they'd discarded, as the woman I'd become despite them. By morning, I had made my choice. I wasn't going to crash the party or make a scene. I was going to ghost through it. Invisible, unrecognized, just another face in the crowd paying respects to a retiring colonel. But getting into the Riverside Country Club undetected would require more than just showing up. I spent the day transforming myself into someone the Harrison family would never recognize. 20 years in the military had taught me the art of blending in, of becoming unremarkable when the mission required it. I drove to a salon in downtown Richmond, 3 hours from my apartment in Arlington, where no one would know Diana Harrison. The stylist, a chatty woman named Rosa, worked magic with scissors and dye. My shoulder-length auburn hair became a sleek black bob with bangs that shadowed my face. Colored contacts turned my green eyes brown. Subtle contouring changed the shape of my cheekbones and jawline. When she finished, I looked like a completely different person, older, sharper, forgettable in the way that professional women often are. Next, I needed credentials. The country club would have a guest list, security, and staff who'd worked there for years. I couldn't just walk in claiming to be someone's plus one. But I had advantages my family didn't know about. 20 years of military service had connected me to networks they couldn't imagine, including a former Army intelligence officer named Sarah Chen, who now ran corporate security consulting. One phone call was all it took. "I need a backstory for tonight," I told her. "Something clean, something that won't raise questions." "Consider it done," Sarah replied. "You're Rebecca Martinez, representing Apex Defense Solutions. We've been courting military retirees for consulting positions. Perfectly legitimate reason to be there, and I'll make sure you're on the list." The clothes came next. I chose a navy blue dress suit. Professional but not military. Expensive enough to belong at a country club event, but not so flashy as to draw attention. Low heels I could run in if necessary. Minimal jewelry. A leather portfolio that looked like it contained important documents, but actually held my real identification and emergency cash. The hardest part was the mindset shift. For 8 years, I'd been Major Diana Harrison, then Lieutenant Colonel, then Colonel, climbing ranks through sheer determination and excellence. Tonight, I had to forget all of that. Tonight, I was nobody special. Just a defense contractor working the room, collecting business cards, and making small talk about retirement opportunities. I practiced in the mirror, adjusting my voice to a slightly lower register, softening my military bearing into something more corporate. The woman looking back at me was a stranger, which was exactly what I needed. Diana Harrison was persona non grata at this event. Rebecca Martinez could walk through those doors without anyone batting an eye. The drive to the country club took 40 minutes through Virginia countryside that held too many memories. Past the high school where I'd struggled through classes while Marcus excelled. Past the church where we'd attended services every Sunday, Dad in his dress uniform, Mom in her best dress. Me trailing behind, feeling like I never quite belonged. Past the old recruitment office where I'd signed my enlistment papers while Dad was deployed, choosing my own path for the first time in my life. As I pulled into the club's circular driveway, watching uniformed valets direct luxury cars toward parking, I felt something I hadn't expected. Calm. Not peace. There was too much unfinished business for that, but clarity. I knew why I was here, and it had nothing to do with revenge or vindication. I was here to say goodbye. To close a chapter that had been left hanging open for too long. Whatever happened next would define not just this night, but who I chose to be moving forward. The Riverside Country Club's main ballroom buzzed with the refined energy of military aristocracy. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over men in dress blues and women in elegant cocktail attire. The walls were lined with photographs of distinguished guests from decades past. Generals, senators, defense contractors, who'd shaped American military policy over champagne and prime rib. I moved through the crowd like a shadow, my Rebecca Martinez persona, sliding seamlessly into conversations about defense contracts and retirement consulting. The portfolio under my arm gave me purpose, a reason to approach strangers and make small talk. No one looked twice at another corporate representative working the room. Then I saw him. Dad stood near the main stage, resplendent in his dress uniform, chest decorated with ribbons that told the story of 3 decades of service. He looked older than I remembered, grayer, but still carried himself with the ramrod posture that had intimidated me as a child. He was surrounded by a circle of admirers, holding court like the military royalty he'd always believed himself to be. I stayed on the periphery, close enough to hear his voice but far enough to remain invisible. He was telling a story about a training exercise gone wrong, his audience laughing at all the right moments. The same story he'd told at dinner parties when I was young, polished over years of repetition. Some things never changed. Mom stood beside him, elegant in navy blue, her silver hair perfectly styled. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She smiled and nodded at appropriate moments, playing the role of the devoted military wife she'd perfected over 30 years of marriage. But I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. I was studying her face, memorizing it, when someone appeared beside me. Enjoying the celebration? The voice was warm, professional, with just a hint of curiosity. I turned to find a man in Air Force dress uniform, tall and lean with the bearing of someone accustomed to command. His uniform displayed the silver eagles of a full colonel, and his nameplate read, Torres. He looked to be in his early 40s, with intelligent dark eyes that seemed to catalog everything they saw. "It's quite an impressive turnout," I replied in Rebecca's voice, keeping my tone neutral and professional. "Colonel Harrison has clearly made quite an impact during his career." "That he has," Torres agreed, but something in his tone suggested complexity beneath the politeness. "Are you here representing a firm?" "Apex Defense Solutions," I said smoothly, offering him my business card. "We specialize in connecting retired military officers with consulting opportunities in the private sector." He glanced at the card, then back at my face with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The noise of the party seemed to fade into background static. "You know," he said slowly, his voice dropping to just above a whisper, "you remind me of someone I've heard a lot about. A remarkable officer who's been making quite a name for herself in Pentagon circles." My blood turned to ice. No one should have been able to see through my disguise, especially not someone who appeared to be from Marcus's circle. But Torres wasn't done. He leaned slightly closer, his voice barely audible above the party noise. "Diana Harrison, distinguished graduate of Officer Candidate School. Multiple deployments, Bronze Star recipient. Currently serving in a very interesting capacity at the Pentagon." I felt the floor tilt beneath me. How could he possibly know? My Pentagon position was classified at levels that even most military personnel couldn't access. My service record was good, but not so remarkable that random Air Force colonels would memorize details about my career. "I'm sorry," I managed, my voice carefully controlled despite my racing heart. "I think you have me confused with someone else." Torres smiled, but it wasn't entirely friendly. "Do I? Because the woman I'm thinking of would be exactly the type of person who might show up somewhere she wasn't invited, wearing a disguise, trying to blend into a crowd that included her own family." The words hit like physical blows. He knew. Somehow, impossibly, this stranger knew exactly who I was and why I was here. But more terrifying than his knowledge was the implication behind it. If he could see through my carefully constructed cover, who else might be watching? "I think there's been some mistake," I said, taking a step backward. "No mistake," Torres replied quietly. "The question is, what happens next?" Before I could respond to Torres, a familiar voice cut through the party noise like a blade. "Rebecca Martinez from Apex Defense, right?" Marcus appeared at my elbow, drink in hand, that same confident smile he'd worn since childhood. "I'm Marcus Harrison, the guest of honor's son. Dad mentioned you might be here tonight." My heart stopped. Marcus was standing 2 feet away from me, close enough to see every detail of my face, and he had no idea who I was. The disguise had worked, at least on him, but Torres's knowing look told me my cover was far from secure. "Pleasure to meet you," I managed, extending my hand. His grip was firm, confident, exactly like Dad's. "Your father has quite an impressive service record." "That he does," Marcus agreed, then glanced at Torres. "Colonel Torres, I see you've met one of our corporate guests. Miguel and I go way back, served together in Afghanistan." Torres nodded politely, but his eyes never left my face. "Ms. Martinez and I were just discussing career opportunities for distinguished retirees. She was telling me about some of the remarkable officers she's encountered in her work." The subtext was clear. He was giving me an opening, or maybe a warning. I couldn't tell which. "Speaking of distinguished officers," Marcus continued, oblivious to the undercurrent, "you should hear about my sister. Well, former sister, I guess. Diana was always the family disappointment. But she somehow managed to make a career out of the military. Haven't heard from her in years, but last I knew she was still playing soldier somewhere. The casual cruelty in his voice hit me like a physical blow. Playing soldier. After everything I'd achieved, everything I'd sacrificed, I was still just playing pretend in his mind. Family can be complicated, I said carefully, fighting to keep Rebecca's voice steady. Not really complicated in this case, Marcus replied with a bitter laugh. Some people are cut out for military life, others aren't. Diana was always too soft, too emotional. Dad tried to warn her, but she was stubborn. Enlisted anyway, and basically disappeared from our lives. Probably for the best. Tonight's about celebrating real achievement, not dwelling on family failures. Torres's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Sometimes the people we underestimate surprise us the most, he said quietly. Maybe, Marcus shrugged, but some bridges burn too completely to rebuild. Anyway, Ms. Martinez, I should introduce you to some of the other retirees here tonight. Dad's got some friends who might be interested in consulting work. As Marcus began to steer me toward another group, Torres caught my arm gently but firmly. Actually, I was hoping to continue our conversation about Pentagon opportunities, he said smoothly. There are some positions that require very specific clearance levels, the kind that someone with Ms. Martinez's background might find interesting. Marcus looked between us, clearly picking up on something but not sure what. Pentagon work? I didn't realize Apex dealt with that level of placement. We handle very specialized positions, I replied, my mind racing. Torres knew exactly what he was doing. He was protecting my cover while simultaneously revealing that he knew far more about my real job than he should. Well, I'll leave you to it, Marcus said, but his tone had shifted, become more cautious. Miguel, we should catch up later. And Ms. Martinez, I hope you find what you're looking for tonight. As he walked away, Torres turned to face me fully. Your brother has no idea what you've become, does he? He asked quietly. I don't know what you're talking about, I replied, but my voice lacked conviction. Diana, I know exactly who you are. The question is whether you're ready to show your family the same truth. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. Torres knew too much about my Pentagon position for this to be a coincidence. Military intelligence had taught me that when someone appears with impossible knowledge, they're either an ally, an enemy, or bait. I had to find out which. We need to talk, I said quietly, somewhere private. Torres nodded toward the club's library, a quieter space away from the main celebration. As we walked, I used every counter-surveillance technique I'd learned over 2 decades of service. Checking for followers, memorizing exit routes, cataloging potential threats. Old habits from deployments where paranoia kept you alive. The library was empty except for the distant sound of the party filtering through heavy oak doors. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, filled with military histories and leather-bound classics that probably hadn't been opened in years. Torres closed the door behind us and turned to face me. Before you ask, he said, I'm not here by accident. I've been tracking your career for the past 3 years. Tracking me? My hand instinctively moved toward my purse, where I kept a ceramic knife that would pass through metal detectors. Who are you working for? The same people you work for, Torres replied calmly. Pentagon, Defense Intelligence Agency, specifically the Strategic Planning Division. I know about Operation Clearwater, the Iranian weapons cache you helped neutralize last year, and the classified briefing you gave to the Joint Chiefs about Chinese cyber capabilities. My blood ran cold. Those operations were classified at levels that required presidential authorization to discuss. Either Torres had clearance so high it made my own look insignificant, or someone had leaked information that could get me charged with treason. Even if that were true, I said carefully, you still haven't explained why you're here. Torres reached into his jacket pocket slowly, telegraphing his movements to avoid triggering my defensive instincts. He pulled out a leather credentials case and flipped it open. The badge inside bore the seal of the Defense Intelligence Agency and identified him as Colonel Miguel Torres, Senior Intelligence Officer. Your family doesn't know it, he said, but they've been under investigation for 6 months. Your father's consulting contracts, Marcus's recent promotion track, even some of your mother's charity work. There are questions about financial irregularities, classified information sharing, and possible foreign influence operations. The room seemed to tilt. That's impossible. Dad's career is spotless. Marcus follows every regulation to the letter. Surface appearances can be deceiving, Torres replied. Your father's been accepting consulting fees from defense contractors while still holding security clearances. Marcus received a promotion that jumped him ahead of 12 more qualified officers. And your mother's charity has been receiving donations from shell companies with ties to foreign intelligence services. I sank into one of the leather chairs, my mind racing. If what Torres was saying was true, my family wasn't just guilty of rejecting me, they were potentially guilty of betraying everything they claimed to stand for. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because you're clean, Torres said. 20 years of service, multiple background investigations, financial records that show you live well below your means, despite your rank and position. You're also the only Harrison family member with both the clearance and the moral authority to help us get to the truth. You want me to spy on my own family. I want you to help us understand whether they're victims or participants. Your brother invited me here tonight specifically to meet you. Not Rebecca Martinez, but you. Someone told him you'd be here. The implications hit me like a sledgehammer. Marcus's casual appearance at my conversation with Torres hadn't been coincidence. Someone had informed him I would be at this party, despite the fact that I'd told no one about my plans. They know I'm here, I said. They've known since you walked through the door, Torres confirmed. The question is, what are they planning to do about it? Before Torres could explain further, the library door opened. Marcus stepped inside, no longer wearing his casual party smile. Behind him came two men I didn't recognize, both in civilian clothes, but carrying themselves with military bearing. Security contractors, most likely. Miguel, Marcus said, his voice friendly but with an edge underneath. I see you found our missing family member. Torres moved slightly, positioning himself between me and the door. Marcus, I was just having a pleasant conversation with Ms. Martinez about career opportunities. Cut the shit, Marcus replied, dropping all pretense. We know exactly who she is and why you're both here. The question is whether we handle this quietly or if it becomes a problem. I stood slowly, my mind racing through tactical options. 3 against 2, but Torres and I had training advantages. The real question was whether Marcus was acting alone or if this went deeper. Handle what, exactly? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Marcus laughed, but there was no humor in it. The same Diana, always pretending to be tougher than she really is. You think we didn't know you'd been sniffing around our family's business? You think we didn't plan for this? Our family's business? I stepped forward, anger overriding caution. Since when did selling classified information become family business? Since Dad realized the military wasn't going to take care of us the way it should, Marcus shot back. 30 years of service, and what did he have to show for it? A pension that barely covers the mortgage, and a government that tosses veterans aside the moment they're no longer useful. Torres spoke quietly without taking his eyes off the security contractors. So you decided to supplement his income through treason. We prefer to think of it as evening the playing field, one of the contractors said. He had a thick Boston accent and hands that stayed too close to his jacket. Your daddy's been very helpful in understanding military procurement processes. Amazing what defense contractors will pay for advanced knowledge of contract decisions. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Dad's consulting work wasn't just questionable. It was actively criminal. He'd been selling information about upcoming defense contracts, giving certain companies insider advantages worth millions of dollars. And Marcus's promotion? I asked. Payment for services rendered, Marcus said proudly. Amazing how quickly your career advances when you have friends in the right places. Friends who appreciate access to classified personnel files and security clearance databases. I felt sick. My brother wasn't just benefiting from corruption. He was actively participating in it, using his position to provide intelligence that could compromise national security. You're both traitors, I said. We're survivors, Marcus corrected. And we're patriots who understand that sometimes you have to work outside the system to protect American interests. Our clients are American defense companies competing against foreign competitors. We're helping American businesses win. By compromising classified information that could get people killed, Torres said. Casualties of war. The second contractor replied with a shrug. Question is, what are we going to do about our witnesses here? Marcus looked at me with something that might have been sadness. You know, Diana, this could have been simple. You could have stayed away like you were supposed to. Dad's retiring. I'm advancing my career. Mom's happy with her charity work. Everyone wins. Except the soldiers whose lives you've put at risk, I said. Always the idealist, Marcus sighed. That's your problem, sister. You never learned that principles are luxuries people like us can't afford. The contractor with the Boston accent took a step forward. Enough talking. We've got a timeline to maintain. That's when I realized the truth. This wasn't just about discovering family corruption. This was a trap. They'd known I was coming, known Torres was investigating, and planned to eliminate both problems tonight. One more question, I said, stalling for time while calculating distances and angles. How long has this been going on? Marcus smiled coldly. Since about a month after you enlisted. Turns out having a daughter in the military opened doors Dad never knew existed. Too bad you were always too naive to understand the opportunities. The library door opened again, but this time it wasn't another enemy. Mom stepped inside, her elegant party dress replaced with dark clothing, a small recording device in her hand, and an expression I'd never seen before. Fierce determination mixed with 20 years of suppressed anger. That's enough, Marcus, she said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that made everyone in the room freeze. Marcus spun around, his face going pale. Mom? What are you doing here? What I should have done years ago, she replied, holding up the recording device. Stopping this family from destroying itself and everyone around it. The contractors reached for their weapons, but Torres was faster. In one fluid motion, he drew his service pistol and positioned himself to cover both men. Hands where I can see them, gentlemen. Mom, Marcus said, his voice cracking, you don't understand what you're doing if this information gets out. I understand perfectly, she interrupted. I've understood for years. Every late-night phone call your father thought I couldn't hear. Every mysterious payment that appeared in our accounts. Every time he came home from consulting meetings with information he shouldn't have had. I stared at her, my mind reeling. You knew? She looked at me with eyes full of pain and regret. I've known since the beginning, Diana. I've been documenting everything, collecting evidence, waiting for the right moment to stop it. From her purse, she pulled out a thick manila envelope. Phone records, bank statements, copies of classified documents your father photographed in his home office, audio recordings of planning meetings. Everything the authorities would need to prosecute this entire network. Marcus backed against the bookshelf, his confident demeanor crumbling. You can't do this. You'll destroy Dad's legacy, his reputation, everything he worked for. His legacy? Mom's voice rose for the first time. His legacy is selling out his country for money while driving away the daughter who actually embodied everything he claimed to believe in. She turned to me, tears streaming down her face. I tried to protect you by keeping you away. Every time you tried to come home, every time you reached out, I convinced your father to reject you because I knew what they were planning. They wanted to use your clearance, your position, your access. I couldn't let that happen. The truth hit me like a physical blow. The 8 years of silence. Was me protecting you from becoming part of this? She said. Every birthday card I couldn't send. Every promotion I couldn't celebrate. Every holiday I spent wondering if you were safe. It was all to keep you clean. Torres kept his weapon trained on the contractors while addressing Mom. Mrs. Harrison, how long have you been working with our investigation? 6 months, she replied. Ever since Agent Patterson contacted me through my charity work. Turned out my donations from foreign shell companies weren't donations at all. They were payments for Thomas's consulting services, laundered through my organization. Marcus stared at his mother in horror. You've been working with the feds? Against your own family? I've been working to save what's left of this family, she shot back. And to protect the daughter you and your father threw away like garbage. One of the contractors made a move toward the door, but Torres shifted his aim. I wouldn't recommend it. This building is surrounded by federal agents, has been since before the party started. You planned this, Marcus said, the realization dawning on his face. We planned this, Mom corrected, looking at me. Diana, Agent Patterson has been monitoring your communications. He knew you'd try to come tonight, and we used that knowledge to finally spring the trap we've been setting for months. I looked at Torres with new understanding. You weren't tracking my career, you were protecting me. Both, he admitted. Your mother reached out to us when she realized your father was planning to somehow involve you in their operation. She's been feeding us information to build our case while simultaneously working to keep you out of their reach. Mom stepped toward me, her hand trembling as she reached out. I know I can never make up for the years of silence, the pain of making you think we didn't care. But I needed you to stay pure, to stay honorable, to be everything this family should have been. For the first time in 8 years, I let my mother touch me. Her hand was warm against my cheek, and I could see in her eyes the love that had been hidden behind years of necessary cruelty. I've been so proud of you, she whispered. Every promotion, every commendation, every time someone mentioned your name in Washington circles. You became everything I hoped you would, despite us. The reunion was shattered by the sound of gunfire from the main ballroom. 3 sharp cracks that sent ice through my veins, followed by screaming and the crash of overturned tables. That's our cue to leave, one of the contractors said, making another move toward the door. Torres stepped between them and the exit. Nobody moves. Diana, what's your assessment? My training kicked in automatically. 3 shots, small caliber, probably suppressed. Panic response suggests civilian casualties. I looked at Mom, whose face had gone white. Where's Dad? Main stage, she whispered. He was supposed to give his speech at 9. Marcus suddenly lunged toward a bookshelf, his hand reaching for something hidden behind the volumes. I moved faster, tackling him before he could retrieve whatever he'd concealed there. We crashed into the shelf, books tumbling around us as I pinned his arm behind his back. What's behind there, Marcus? I demanded. Emergency protocol, he gasped. If the operation was compromised, we had contingencies. Torres moved to the bookshelf and pulled away the volumes Marcus had been reaching for. Hidden behind them was a small explosive device, timer already counting down. 3 minutes and 40 seconds. Shaped charge, Torres identified grimly. Designed to bring down this section of the building. Anyone in this room would be buried in the collapse. The library door burst open and Dad appeared, no longer the dignified retiree but a desperate man with a pistol in his hand and blood on his dress uniform. Let him go, Diana, he ordered, pointing the weapon at me. Step away from your brother. I stayed in position, keeping Marcus pinned. Dad, it's over. The feds have everything. Mom's been working with them for months. His eyes found Mom, and for a moment something cracked in his expression. Lillian, you... How could you betray your own family? The same way you betrayed your country, she replied, her voice steady despite her tears. The same way you drove away our daughter for refusing to become part of your corruption. I built this family, Dad shouted. I sacrificed everything for 30 years, and what did I get? A pension that barely covers expenses, and a government that forgets you exist the moment you're not useful. So you decided to become useful to our enemies instead, I said, still holding Marcus down. How many American soldiers died because of intelligence you sold, Dad? No Americans died, he protested. We only dealt with defense contractors, corporate intelligence, procurement information. No operational security was ever compromised. Torres spoke without lowering his weapon. Tell that to the Delta Force team that walked into an ambush in Syria because their equipment specifications were leaked to Iranian-backed forces. Tell that to the families of the 3 Marines who died when their convoy was hit by IEDs, built with components your clients helped procure. Dad's face went gray. That's impossible. We never dealt with foreign governments directly. Your clients did, Torres continued. Defense contractors who sold your information to shell companies that funneled it to hostile intelligence services. You may not have pulled the triggers, but you loaded the guns. The timer on the explosive device showed 2 minutes remaining. Around us, the sounds from the ballroom had shifted from panic to organized evacuation. Federal agents taking control of the situation. Thomas, Mom said quietly, it's time to stop. Put the gun down and let's end this without anyone else getting hurt. I can't, Dad said, his voice breaking. If I surrender, everything comes out. Marcus's career is destroyed, your charity work is exposed as money laundering, and the family name is ruined forever. The family name was ruined the moment you chose money over honor, I said. But it doesn't have to stay that way. Marcus is young enough to rebuild. Mom can start over. But only if we stop this now. Marcus struggled beneath me. Diana, you don't understand. If Dad goes down, he's taking people with him. Important people. They won't let that happen. What people? Torres demanded. Senators, generals, defense secretaries, Marcus gasped. This network goes all the way to the top. They'll kill everyone in this room before they let it become public. The timer showed 90 seconds. Dad's hand was shaking as he kept the pistol trained on me. Choose, Dad, I said. Your daughter or your conspiracy. Your family or your fear. But choose now, because in 90 seconds this room becomes a crater, and everyone in it dies. Dad's gun wavered as he looked between me, Mom, and the ticking bomb. 60 seconds. There's no way out of this, Thomas, Mom said softly. But there's still a way to do the right thing. Help us stop this before more people die. For a moment I saw the man who'd once taught me to tie my shoes, who'd bandaged my scraped knees, who'd read me bedtime stories about heroes who always chose courage over comfort. That man was still in there, buried under years of bitterness and compromise. The gun lowered slightly. I never meant for it to go this far, he whispered. 45 seconds. Torres moved toward the explosive device. Diana, I need you to keep Marcus still. This has a tamper trigger. I tightened my grip on my brother as Torres examined the bomb. His fingers moved with practiced precision, tracing wires and identifying components. It's a dead man's switch, he announced grimly. If Marcus's heart rate drops below 60 beats per minute or spikes above 120, it detonates immediately. If he moves more than 3 feet from this position, it detonates. This was designed to ensure no one in this room could survive to testify. Marcus's breathing became ragged. They told me it was just insurance, he gasped. A way to make sure everyone stayed quiet if things went wrong. Who told you that? I demanded. Patterson, Marcus said. Agent Patterson. He's not FBI. He's private sector. He's been running this operation from the beginning. The revelation hit like a sledgehammer. Torres's face went white. Patterson's been our handler for this investigation. If he's compromised... 30 seconds. The library door exploded inward, and federal agents poured into the room. But leading them wasn't the rescue team I'd hoped for. It was a man in a dark suit with gray hair and cold eyes. Agent Patterson. Stand down, Colonel Torres, Patterson ordered, his own weapon drawn. You're interfering with a classified operation. Like hell I am, Torres replied, not moving from his position by the bomb. This is a criminal conspiracy, and you're part of it. Patterson smiled coldly. This is a national security operation designed to identify and neutralize foreign intelligence threats. The Harrison family has been cooperating with our investigation into Chinese infiltration of defense contractors. By selling them classified information, I said. By feeding them false intelligence while we mapped their networks, Patterson corrected. Unfortunately, some of you have learned too much about methods that must remain classified. 20 seconds. Mom stepped forward, pulling the recording device from her purse. I've got it all, Agent Patterson. Every conversation, every meeting, every payment. Your voice authorizing the sale of real intelligence to foreign contacts. Your signature on documents approving the elimination of witnesses. Patterson's expression didn't change. Mrs. Harrison, you're suffering from stress-related delusions. Your husband's retirement has been difficult for the entire family. 15 seconds. Torres made his choice. He lunged for the bomb's control panel, fingers flying over the interface. Diana, get your family out of here, now. I'm not leaving you, I said. That's an order from a superior officer, he snapped. 10 seconds. Dad dropped his weapon and grabbed Mom's hand. Lillian, we have to go. But as we moved toward the door, Patterson blocked our path. "I'm afraid I can't allow that." 5 seconds. That's when Marcus made his decision. Despite the risk, despite the dead man's switch, he threw himself sideways toward Patterson, tackling the corrupt agent just as Torres yanked the final wire. The bomb didn't explode. In the sudden silence, Patterson's weapon skittered across the floor, and Torres was on him in an instant, cuffing him while reading him his rights. "Miguel Torres, Defense Intelligence Agency," he announced to the other agents. "Agent Patterson is under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and attempted murder." The lead federal agent, a woman with steel gray hair and tired eyes, stepped forward. "Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Counterintelligence. We've been tracking Patterson's operation for 8 months. Mrs. Harrison, your cooperation has been invaluable." Marcus sat on the floor, breathing heavily, staring at his hands like he couldn't believe what he'd just done. "Why?" I asked him. He looked up at me with eyes that suddenly seemed much younger. "Because you were right. Some things are more important than self-preservation." 6 months later, I stood in a federal courthouse in Alexandria, watching Dad being led away in handcuffs. The judge had sentenced him to 12 years for conspiracy, treason, and endangering national security. His military pension was revoked, his rank stripped, his name removed from the honor rolls he'd once been so proud to see it on. Marcus received 8 years, but with the possibility of parole in 5 due to his cooperation and his actions that night in the library. He'd testified against Patterson and the entire network, helping prosecutors unravel a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government and defense contracting. Patterson himself got life without parole. The evidence Mom had collected, combined with Marcus's testimony and Torres's investigation, revealed a network that had been selling American military secrets for over a decade. 3 senators resigned in disgrace. A defense secretary was indicted. Dozens of defense contractors saw their security clearances revoked and their executives arrested. Mom stood beside me in the courthouse hallway, gripping my hand like she was afraid I might disappear again. She'd been granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation. Her charity work cleared of any wrongdoing once prosecutors realized she'd been an unwitting money laundering vehicle. But the legal vindication couldn't erase years of living with the guilt of knowing and being unable to act. "How are you holding up?" I asked her as we walked toward the parking garage. "I keep thinking about the families of those soldiers who died because of information your father sold," she said quietly. "How do I live with that?" "The same way I lived with 8 years of thinking my family had abandoned me," I replied. "One day at a time, focusing on what you can do to make things better going forward." She squeezed my hand. "I want to work with military family support organizations. Real ones this time. Help families dealing with deployment PTSD, reintegration challenges. Use what's left of my reputation for something worthwhile." 3 weeks later, Torres and I sat in a Pentagon briefing room, receiving new assignments. The investigation had revealed gaps in security protocols that needed addressing, and we'd been tasked with developing new systems to prevent the kind of infiltration Patterson's network had achieved. "Congratulations, General Harrison," Torres said as we reviewed our orders. I still wasn't used to the promotion. 1 star, the youngest female general in Army history. A recognition that came with the territory of having helped expose one of the most damaging intelligence breaches in recent memory. But it felt hollow knowing it had come at the cost of my family's destruction. "Any word from Marcus?" Torres asked. "He writes every week," I said. "He's teaching literacy classes to other inmates, working on his master's degree in counseling. Says he wants to help veterans dealing with moral injury when he gets out." "And your father?" I shrugged. Radio silence. I think seeing me in the courtroom, realizing what I'd become while he was busy betraying everything I stood for, it broke something in him that can't be fixed. Torres nodded. "Some relationships don't survive the truth. But others do," I said, thinking of Mom's weekly Sunday dinners at my Arlington apartment, the careful way we were rebuilding trust one conversation at a time. That evening, I stood on my apartment balcony overlooking the Potomac, thinking about the girl who'd enlisted 20 years ago to prove her worth to a father who'd already decided she had none. She'd succeeded beyond her wildest dreams, but at a cost she never could have imagined. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Saw the news about your new assignment. Your grandmother would be so proud. You've become everything she hoped our family could be. For the first time in years, that felt like enough. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought on foreign soil, but in the spaces between who we were and who we choose to become. Sometimes saving your family means losing them first, then building something new from what remains. I'd lost the family that raised me, but I'd found the family I was meant to create. And maybe that was worth everything it had cost. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.